All right, Evan, welcome to the Layered Onion podcast. I'm super excited for you to be here. Maybe you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here. My name is Evan Dannells. I'm the executive chef and owner of Cadre Restaurant and one of the partners in Lola's high-low lounge here in Madison, Wisconsin.
So one really exciting thing is that you participated in the Shallot.
Yes, we did.
And we had a recipe, if we can see that. It's a chicken recipe. And I would love to talk a little bit right away about the recipe, because you were just telling me a little bit that it's based in a Normandy recipe.
Which would make it Normandy-in? Maybe? Colton?
Definitely
No.
French.
Nope.
Definitely French.
Sorry. We had done this recipe and a photo shoot for it previously. During COVID, we did a really interesting thing to keep our customers and staff engaged, where we toured all around France, virtually, and picked different areas of it and sort of made the dishes that were the most representative of that area. And it was kind of a deep dive into like regional French food in a way that I think only during a global pandemic would we have had the time and energy to do that level of research. And so Colton kind of drew the map. Colton will be on after me. He's our general manager and sommelier at Cadre, or as I jokingly like to say, the guy who makes me sound smart. And Colton picked the roadmap and did most of the heavy research in terms of trying to figure out like where he wanted to go. Because sourcing the wine would usually be harder than figuring out how to make the food. And so we would source wine from the area too, and then go to the place and figure out what dishes sort of made that area. This was one of the ones from Normandy that at face value reads as just very simple, but as you dig into the meat of it, oh, no pun intended, because it is a chicken dish, but as you dig into it, you realize that there's thought behind every step of it. And I thought that in something called the layered onion, I thought that would be a fun fit.
It was interesting to me because I was actually in Normandy in September.
Oh, wow.
And so when I saw the dish, I thought about, I actually went to a farm where it was owned by 5 brothers, and one brother was in charge of the poultry, one was in charge of the beef, one was in charge of milk, and they made cheese. And it was really interesting because they had a chicken dish there. It wasn't like this, but it was kind of interesting. So,
potatoes, chicken, cider are all very, very staples of that area. And I think what's neat about it that a lot of Americans have a hard time wrapping their head around too is that there's so much distinct food culture inside of France, and France is not even the size of Texas.
And you are so right, because even we were in Normandy and then spent time in Paris. And of course, it's completely different there. So, well, let me talk a little bit about your work with the Dane County Food Collective. So as executive chef and owner of Cadre, and you are participating in Dane County Food Collective, which really came together in your mind as one of the sort of board of directors. What did you see as the real meaning of bringing Dane County Food Collective together?
Well, so that was another thing, ironically, born of COVID. So I had the feeling inside of the restaurant world that when COVID we all saw like the shutdowns and things coming in early 2020, but nobody realized that it was going to last as long or be as impactful to our industry as it ended up being. And it wasn't until, because originally it was 2 weeks, mask up for 2 weeks and it'll go away. And then surely it'll be done in 6 months. And then 2 years later, we're still not back to a pre-COVID sales level. As we were sort of beginning to get our way out of COVID, and we were looking back at like what we could have done better as a food system, a few of us felt pretty disappointed at sort of the lack of communication and networking and resources that were available to people to help navigate a problem like this. And knock on wood, like, I hope we don't have to deal with another global pandemic that will make people not want to go in restaurants. But I don't believe that this particular crisis is the last one that we'll face in my professional life in the next 20 or 30 years that I want to keep cooking. There's going to be something else that makes it hard for us to get customers in the door. And it was hard on farmers. It was hard on restaurant people. It was hard on consumers. And I felt that Madison, of all places, we should be able to start an organization that helps people connect and network and become friends with each other and provide infrastructure so that we can not only navigate the next pandemic, but continue to grow and flourish together.
Well, one of the big parts of the Dane County Food Collective is really about mental and physical well-being.
And that was a big one too, was we felt like coming out of COVID that we realized that we had people were coming back to work scared, damaged. I mean, in a lot of ways, and in an industry that already has a lot of damaged people to begin with. And so we realized that, you know, the people that work for you are the foundation of your business, and that we needed to start there. And so fortunately, Dan Fox was already doing a great deal of work with health and wellness on his own. And then we kind of folded it into our efforts, and it's even grown from there. And we fundamentally started out with trying to make sure that the people who work for us have access to mental and physical care, because, you know, they're the people who run our businesses.
And I think something that maybe not a lot of people, but was one really big reason I wanted to see culinary art in the Shallot is folks in the food service industry are really creators and artists. And some might be artists in a more traditional way, but those that cook and plate, and you're all artists. Oh, no, absolutely. I think, you know, I hate to equate art with poverty. But sadly, that seems to be the case in most walks of life. But as I always tell people who work with me, is like, you have to love doing what we do for a living. Otherwise, it's a pretty stupid way to make a living. And I feel like art is the same way. You know, our unfortunately in the United States of America, we do not look at being an artist as a vocation that deserves compensation. And so it's hard to even, you know, get something together that's relatively inexpensive in the grand scheme of art distribution and put together. Like, you know, it's a struggle. You don't do what you do because you're going to step into your Bentley when we get done with this podcast. Right. Well, what made you want to be a chef? What was your origin? There is not a tangible single experience that I can draw from for that. My parents, in hindsight, said that it was always meant to be, and it was just a matter of me figuring it out. I always liked every food anyone ever put in front of me. My parents pushed the boundaries of that when they noticed when I was very young. I was the 8-year-old that was demanding to have sushi. And food was always just a very central point for me. All of my strongest memories are all related to food. And so where we were going and what we were doing, I was always the one who was interested in where we were going to be eating, where we were going, and what we were doing. And it wasn't until I walked into the first restaurant to cover for a dishwasher that didn't show up on a Friday night when I was 14 years old, and walked in, took one look around at that pirate ship and went, yep, that's for me. And I really haven't looked back ever since. It's interesting. I just started a book called The Golden Orchard, and it's all about food and memories. And it's about a grandmother who's has Alzheimer's, and it's kind of a little bit of a fantasy, but every time she cooks this food, it draws her back to her memories.
I've actually read something not that long ago that talked about how they've been working with a lot of olfactory things with Alzheimer's patients because as a human animal, we have like a deeper sense of memory related to smell. And so sometimes when, Alzheimer's is sort of like your memories going haywire.
Right.
And so sometimes they can use that as like a grounding spot to have people sort of recenter themselves, which is really neat. I think, because for me, at least, it's absolutely true. Like I can't tell you what the room, my grandparents' kitchen, or I can't tell you what the kitchen that my grandparents had at their house looked like, but I can tell you exactly what they used to put out every time we came to visit. And I remember what that looked like.
Well, and let's face it, a meal is so many of your senses.
Mm-hmm.
It really captures almost all of your senses.
It does. And furthermore, it has the intimacy of being something that you have to do in order to live as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so like turning a function that you need in order to survive into an art form, I think is a pretty fun thing. Because everybody's got to eat. Food is the thing that binds us. It's the thing we gather around. That's why the mosaic dinners that we did was such a cool idea too. It was like bringing back, I think the family table is a thing that's been sort of lost. And so being able to do that with a collection of friends is also a beautiful thing. And that's also the dish that we did for this issue, was, I think, also indicative of that. It's a quartered bird roasted in a crock together. It's something that's meant to be shared, not individually plated and distributed, which I think, family style is the most intimate of settings for sharing that art and craft.
So maybe talk a little bit about the mosaic dinners, because that was a Marlin Hall had a Fulbright scholarship, correct? I'm pretty sure a Fulbright, and it was to have this concept of these mosaic dinners. Maybe you could talk briefly about it.
Are you going to have Noah on?
No.
At all? Okay. Okay. Because those
He's already been on.
Yeah. We just hosted one for Noah for the most part. But I was in the back providing for it. I didn't take part in a mosaic dinner. But to be honest with you, that's where I'm more comfortable anyways. It's one of those things that's what I love about it so much is that the actual format of putting together that dinner is so simple, but it's something that would never happen unless you sought out doing it like that. Like, how often have you been like, oh, I wish I would have some people over for dinner, but I want to invite a bunch of people I know who don't know each other. Like, people don't typically do that, but that's what the mosaic dinner is about having people make connections and have conversations that they wouldn't normally have and understand a little bit about somebody else that they don't have a chance to know yet, and all around food. And I think it's a great idea. I think if everybody had to do a mosaic dinner once a year, the world would be a very different place. Because we're so in our bubble. And I'm the worst at that. I'm in my little kitchen bubble. People don't even see me. And it forces people outside of that bubble and makes them get perspective.
I want to go back to something you said. You're most comfortable behind the scenes in the kitchen. Why is that?
I'm not really sure. I don't mind being on a podcast or being on stage or talking to people. It's not something that I'm terribly afraid of. But I think for most people in our industry, we're givers. We like to provide for people. And so I personally derive a lot more satisfaction from facilitating or providing people with something rather than participating in a thing. Acts of service is what our industry is about. It's our love language, so to speak.
So I want to ask you a question. If you had to reflect back to that 8-year-old Evan who loved food, was asking for sushi, etc., what would 8-year-old Evan tell today Evan as advice?
I think most people in our industry struggle the most from a point where this is an industry where you have to cut your chops for a really long time. There's a very large amount of time and energy where you traditionally have worked for not a lot of money for a goal that's almost feels unachievably far off. And I think a lot of people later in their life would say this to their earlier version of themselves was be patient. It will come in time. Because everybody's always acting like getting somewhere professionally in this industry is a race. You're looking at, so-and-so was an executive chef by the time they were this age, and so-and-so got this accolade, and why haven't I been recognized for this thing I'm doing yet? It's very competitive in that regard. And I think that if I had to go back, I would tell myself to be patient.
And do you think it's that competition that led to, like you said, when COVID happened, people didn't collaborate?
Yeah, I think it was that, and sort of I don't want to just trash on the U.S. government, but a lack of cohesive direction from our government. I actually think our city and county governments did a pretty stellar job in terms of on the food end. Mm-hmm. I mean, and as much as a chef, I would love to trash on the health department for fun. Because they give us surprise inspections that ruin our days. I think that they did a really good job of following the science and the directives that we were given. But there was definitely a lack of any sort of coherent plan from the government. And unfortunately, we work in an industry that's planning is a necessity. We work with perishable goods. Mm-hmm. We have to plan for the future. And so, there was this, I'm sure everyone in our industry has a 20/20 hindsight. I would have done this in a vacuum if I could go back in time and redo something. And I think the one thing most restaurateurs probably would have said was, man, I wish we'd realized takeout was going to be a driver for as long as it was, because there was very much like a feeling where I was like, we just opened Cadre. Cadre had been open for 4 months before the COVID shutdown.
Oh my goodness.
And we kept telling ourselves, like, we're not going to do takeout because like, that's not what we're about. And this is going to be over soon. And we just kept saying it and saying it and saying it, but we made it anyway. So I don't care anymore. But I do think and that's maybe why we ended up back in this spot, because this dish was born of that. And a lot of the pain and suffering of our industry is born of that. I mean, Francesca Hong, who also has a recipe in this issue of it, probably the single largest driver of why her restaurant was why they had to let go of their restaurant was because they never recovered from COVID. Different people with different landlords in different situations owed different amounts of money, had different problems. I can't even, we're going to be unpacking the effects of COVID on our industry for decades. And so I just hope there isn't another one.
Well, that would be the last one was 100 years ago. So I'm hoping we've moved on.
I don't know, with advances in modern medicine, could be around still.
Well, Evan, thanks so much. But now we're going to have Colton join us. But thanks so much for coming.
My pleasure.
I really appreciate it. And I can't wait. One thing, and I'm going to talk further with Colton about it, but you have an apron on.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a very special event for the next Shallot. We're going to do a fundraiser in June 2nd at Cadre.
Yep.
And we're hosting the recipes of the Shallot, or recipes-inspired.
Yeah. So, we tried really hard to make sure that the recipe that we put in the Shallot was like something that would work at the time that it was going to be released. And so as long as people will bear with us, like, we are going to be making things from the Shallot, but just pass through the lens of the seasonality of right now.
Right.
So, we'll be making a variety of those on the 2nd.
So I'm so excited and thankful that you're willing to host this event and be one of the chefs.
Oh, it's our pleasure.
Yeah, I'm excited about that.
Yeah,
so
this is what Cadre is about, and so we are more than happy. Colton can go into more detail.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.